ABC recently interviewed 3 lifelong conservative Republican women who were all at one point relatively high-ranking members of the Trump administration. And now all of them are saying in one voice that Donald Trump, their former boss, is an existential threat to democracy. And given that they know the guy and worked for the guy, maybe we should take them seriously. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, I've got about 3 or 4 clips to play with respect to this interview. It's ABC News of the Week, hosted by Jonathan Karl. And the 3 lifelong conservative Republican women who were interviewed are in order of prominence, like in their rank in the Trump White House. Former White House Communications Director Alysa Farah Griffin, whom you can now see on The View. She's the token conservative on The View. Former White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews. And former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson, who used to work for Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. And she was a prominent witness in the House January 6th Select Committee's investigation into Donald Trump's desperate, unconstitutional, authoritarian attempts to steal a free and fair election from the legitimate winner, Joe Biden. So in this first clip, they kind of give just a general outline of the danger posed by a second Trump administration.
What would it mean in your mind if Donald Trump became president again? What would a second Trump term look like?
Fundamentally, a second Trump term could mean the end of American democracy as we know it. And I don't say that lightly. We all witnessed him trying to steal a democratic election before and going to historic and unconstitutional lengths to do so. And that just shows that he's willing to basically break every barrier to get into power and to stay into power. But also, I'm very concerned about what the term would actually look like.
We don't need to speculate what a second Trump term would look like because we already saw it play out. To this day, he still doubles down on the fact that he thinks that the election was stolen and fraudulent. And then his rhetoric has just gotten increasingly erratic. I mean, he has literally called for things like doing away with parts of the Constitution, wanting to weaponize the DOJ to enact revenge on his political enemies.
The fact that he feels that he needs to lean into being a dictator alone shows that he is a weak and feeble man who has no sense of character and integrity and has no sense of leadership.
Everyone who is in the
So that last part in particular by Cassidy Hutchinson, that aligns with what the political commentators at Pod Save America, I think it was Dan Pfeiffer, who said that this is the needle that we have to try to thread, those of us who recognize the threat Trump poses. So whether we like it or not, history has shown that there is an attractiveness to a segment of every nation's constituency. There's an attraction to authoritarian strongmen. That's why we've had authoritarian strongmen all throughout history in various countries, right? If there wasn't a part of the population that wasn't attracted to it, then they would never have manifested. So you have to simultaneously take the threat seriously, acknowledge the threat, take it seriously, point it out to others, without feeding the idea that Donald Trump is this, larger than life comic book villain who is, he's Darth Vader, right? We love our villains in pop culture. We like it. We think of them as mighty and powerful and intimidating and cool. That's not Donald Trump. We have to simultaneously say that, yeah, Trump's a threat. He's dangerous, but it's a threat and a danger, born from desperation and weakness and fragility. Unlike people who submit themselves to the democratic processes, right, to things like term limits and the Constitution and rule of law. Donald Trump lacks the strength to do it, and so he feels that in order to operate at all, he has to operate unchecked because he can't handle the idea of operating in a typical healthy democracy. So that's the needle we have to thread. He is a threat, but he's also not the threat of again, a Dr. Doom or Darth Vader or comic book villain. He is a profoundly weak man. And these ideas might seem mutually exclusive, but they're not. And I think that's how we're going to beat Trump, right, is point out that he's a loser. That's the thing reportedly that he can't stand to be perceived as. He can't stand to be perceived as weak or a loser. And we have to point that out, that he is a threat, but he's also a loser. They're not mutually exclusive. So in this next clip, Alysa Farah Griffin points out that, yes, Trump is dangerous, but also one of the things that makes him dangerous are other people in his orbit.
Listen, I'll say this with Donald Trump is what scares me as much as him and his retribution is the almost cult-like following he has over his most diehard supporters. The threats, the harassment, the death threats that you get when he targets you, and he's deliberate in targeting, is really horrifying and has no place in our American discourse. And
And unfortunately, he's made it so that there is room in the American discourse for the threats of Trump cultists. I mean, again, it's not like there have never been political threats before. It's not like Donald Trump invented that, but his cult is relatively unique in weaponizing it, right? You don't hear about Biden supporters or Obama supporters threatening their political opponents, but it's very common with Trump supporters. We talked about this in previous videos, how any attempt to hold Donald Trump civilly or criminally or constitutionally accountable, Cult 45, as I call it, MAGA, they respond viciously. They dox people. They issue threats. People have been arrested for that. You know, any of the judges presiding over Donald Trump's many lawsuits, they've all faced death threats. Their clerks, their staff, their family members. With the Maine Secretary of State, who recently ruled that Trump was constitutionally ineligible and kicked him off the ballot, she's also faced death threats. It's just part and parcel of the MAGA movement. And Donald Trump does absolutely nothing whatsoever to temper it and to calm it down. So in this third clip, they talk about what Donald Trump might do differently, right, compared to round one, what he might do differently in round two.
I'm less worried for any personal aspect for me, but it is he knows how to use government better this time. He can put in diehard loyalists who can weaponize every level of government against his detractors, against the American people, against the media. It's almost too scary to fully wrap your head around what it could look
100%. It is. We're so used to, I think all of us have taken for granted this idea that not only doesn't happen here in America, at least the way it's being described and the way that it might happen with Donald Trump. It can't happen. There's something unique about America that just makes it incapable of succumbing to fascism. That's insane. That is just not true. American institutions are like every other institutions which have ever existed in any other political system, be it 1930s Germany or Italy or whatever, which is they are created by men, fallible men, and maintained by fallible men. And fallible men can be corrupted and replaced with even more corrupt people. And so if you have people running these institutions who who are not loyal to rule of law and the Constitution and democracy, but loyal to an authoritarian strongman like Donald Trump, then they will absolutely bend, break, or twist norms and institutions to favor that person. And that's what people are talking about when they're ringing the bells. People say, well, Donald Trump, sure, he did bad things in his first term, but he didn't pull a Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, and take over the country. Well, even assuming that that's what it would look like, which is not what any of us are saying, again, things are different now. Trump is openly saying he will not employ people who will check him this time. He had people, at least some people in his orbit, who checked some of his worst impulses or wouldn't comply with them. He's not going to make that mistake in round two. And that's what these people are saying now. And then in this last clip, they talk about just, I guess, that in general, this idea that democracy really is on the line here, whether or not we want to recognize it.
This is a fundamental election to continue to safeguard our institutions and our constitutional republic. But if we crumble as a nation, we're setting the example for generations to come, not only in the United States, but on the global stage, that democracy is an experiment and it's not guaranteed. We're extremely fragile as a country, and so is the democratic experiment.
And honestly, we should take that seriously. I mean, I think we should stop taking democracy for granted. We should stop making just the default assumption that it won't happen here, it can't happen here, that maybe that we need to take it seriously and moving forward, no matter what the outcome is, by the way, with the November 2024 election. Hopefully it will end in Trump's ignominious defeat. That's assuming that he's on the ballot in the first place. We can't just go, whoosh, okay, threat over, we're never going to run into fascism again. Donald Trump has opened the door to American fascism, and the door seems to be, held open by the modern Republican Party, one of two major political parties. It's not just Trump. It's not even just Marjorie Taylor Greene and the weirdos in his orbit. The entire modern Republican Party has aided and abetted the fascism coming from Donald Trump. Its elected officials, its thought leaders, political commentators, people in power. So even if Donald Trump is defeated in November, which hopefully he will be, we have to all be vigilant, and we have to punish the Republican Party again and again and again and again and again. Be relentless in it. Give them not an inch of political ground, not an inch of electoral ground, until they bend the knee and say, you know what? Yeah, we really screwed up with this whole fascism thing. And then they tap out and plead for mercy and say, listen, we will never, ever, ever do anything like this again. And we're going to show you by ruthlessly punishing and ostracizing these, right-wing demagogues in our ranks. We're going to show you that we can be a loyal opposition party once again that believes in the democratic republic and the electoral process. We just, disagree on how you should tax rich people, right? That's the room for a conservative movement in this country. But the fascism of Trump, no, it doesn't just end at Trump. Trump has opened the door. So you have to punish them again and again and again and again. Not until they say they're going to change, but until they've proven that they've changed. Okay? Let me know what you think in the comments.